Oh man, this is going to be a fun one today, Jody. I'm excited to talk about a couple ideas we've been chatting about recently. We had a conversation yesterday, and as we were talking, we were like, "Oh man, we should hit record." We decided to do that today, so I'm excited about our conversation.
Yeah, one of the things that you spoke about that really was, I thought, very compelling was talking about the difference between creative and day jobbers. Can you talk about that a bit?
There've been a number of lessons that I've learned throughout the journey. This is probably the most impactful lesson that I learned. It was articulated clearly for me last year. I've been aware of it really now for close to 25 years. When I started my career, I positioned myself around people who were successful and were doing the thing. Right? I was very intentional on putting myself in the path of opportunity. One thing that I learned from those successful musicians, they were engineers, producers, session musicians, artists. They had a very specific mindset, very specific way that they looked at things. I had a lot of my friends, especially being in my early 20s, I had a lot of friends who were starving and struggling musicians trying to get the ball rolling in their careers. So I would be in the studio and spend the day with these, successful people. And in the evening, I'd hang out with my starving and struggling artist friends. And it was such a dramatic difference between the two and between the mindset. And the thing that I started learning was that people in general, just people who have regular day jobs, even if they are pursuing music, but they're the regular day job people, even if they make great money, $60,000, $70,000 a year, or whatever, they're doing very well. Nearly everything is expensive to them, whether it's $100 or $1,000 or a $10,000 thing, it's expensive. And the reason for that is because they're trading their time for dollars. They feel like when they're spending $1,000 on something, they feel like they're spending their life. That's their life that they're giving up for that thing. And they are, because they're trading their time for that money. So they are paying for that thing with their life. Now, what's very interesting is when you look at creative individuals who have an entrepreneurial mindset, and that's key phrase to keep in mind, the entrepreneurial mindset, because we all know musicians and creative individuals who are just amazing at what they do. I have a friend of mine who's sitting on 10 number one songs, but he has no concept of business. And sadly, I've known him for a very long time. Sadly, it's just nothing's going to happen with those songs. He doesn't look at it as a marketplace where he can actually bring a product into the marketplace. That's the entrepreneurial mindset that musicians have to have. So creative individuals with an entrepreneurial mindset, everything that would be expensive to a regular day job person is not expensive. And the reason why is because we're not paying for it with our life. We're paying for those things out of our creativity. So when we need extra money to buy a new car or something like that, we don't look at it like, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me, 3/4 of my year. We don't look at it like that. We look at it like, what can I create that brings value to the market that will allow me to buy that car? That was a huge revelation when it was able to be articulated. I knew that for a long time. I understood it, but it was only within the last 1.5 to 2 years that was actually articulated as the difference in the mindset. I don't think a lot of people understand that. I didn't understand the way to articulate that. That's the big difference between creative individuals with an entrepreneurial mindset and those who are just trading time for dollars. And the key phrase is creatives pay for things out of their creativity, and non-creatives pay for things with their life. And that was such a huge revelation for me that it leads into the second big lesson that I learned, which is that as creatives, we really pull from this infinite well of abundance. For example, like if we go to work, when we come home from work and we go to bed, the next day we wake up, we lost that day. We have a finite amount of time on this earth, and every day that we spend working for someone else is a day that we lose. But when it comes to creativity, I have no less creativity today than I had yesterday. In fact, I would actually even argue as creatives, as time goes on, we actually have more creativity because as we develop our skill sets, our abilities, we flex that creative muscle, we're able to create more quickly at a higher quality. So that was a huge second revelation in just the power of investing time into learning what we need to learn in order to do the creative thing that we want to do. And it really is, we are always drawing from this infinite well of abundance, which then, of course, we can leverage back into monetizing when we create something that has value in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. They have the hardest time believing in themselves, investing in themselves to level up those skills that they need to bring those creations out. So you bring up such a valuable point with that.
I always felt that weird thing. I grew up in a family where I grew up always hearing like, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And so for a long time, I had that mentality too, going into my 20s, like, oh my gosh, that's what had been ingrained in me. But then when I was working with all these other individuals, I just realized that, man, they have a different perspective of money because they're constantly creating it. They're not trading their time for money. They're literally creating money. They're manifesting money essentially out of thin air. The 8 hours they would spend in that studio was not 8 hours times $20 an hour or like a regular paycheck. It was, we're spending 8 hours a day in the studio creating something that can literally bring in tens of thousands of dollars for us year after year after year after year after year. To me, that was such a revelation that I started, looking at that with that mindset of like, how can we really manifest money with our creativity? I'm so thankful that I was able to get around people like that early enough in my career that I was able to change my mindset, look at money and finances and financial freedom and creative freedom in a realities perspective versus the scarcity mindset that a lot of people continue to have.
Right. And that's living with a mindset of feeling like everything is scarce versus having that abundance, being able to create an abundance. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. And that kind of goes into another powerful lesson that you and I've talked a lot about, and it's scaling your business. You've run a business for a long time. I've run a business for a long time. Music is our business. Creating intellectual property is our business. Then bringing it to the marketplace and monetizing it, that's our business. And we've both been able to scale. We've both been in this side of the industry for 2 decades each, and we've scaled our businesses accordingly. And of course, one of the things that we've talked about is the process of going from maybe doubling. A lot of musicians look at like, oh man, if I made $10,000 this year licensing my songs, next year, if I can make $20,000, that would be amazing. Whereas I think you and I have more of the mindset of, okay, we made 10 grand, proof of concept. Now let's 10X it. There's that 10X mentality. The whole idea of scaling at a quick rate, basically 10Xing, is a lot easier than doubling, which sounds weird. I remember when I first learned this concept, I was like, there's no way. There's no way.
It's tied to that abundance. It's tied to that mindset, right?
100%. It's tied to mindset. And the thing that's really interesting is, let's say this is a great example because most people who are going to watch this are musicians who are getting into licensing. So we'll use this as the example. Let's say that year one, you're licensing your songs, and in year one, just on your license fees, just on the upfront license fees, you make $10,000. Now, if you look at that and you go, oh my gosh, now I want to double this. Next year, I want to double this. It's actually, there's a lot to do to double it. When you look at what you're doing, you're most likely doing a number of things right. And so you've probably worked really hard to get to that $10,000. So when you look at 2Xing it, you basically get into this linear process of working harder. Let me look at all the things that are working and let me turn up the dial like 10%. And the reality is, like, you can find 20 or 30 things in your business that you can turn up the volume at, like, 5 to 10% on each of them, and you will ultimately, double your money. But the problem is that you end up working harder and harder and harder and harder and harder because you're making these small tweaks that are already working, and you're putting in more and more and more effort to get those things to ramp up. So yeah, you can double it to $20,000, but you bust your butt and you're doing all the things, as opposed to when you step back and you go, okay, this is working. If you ask yourself the question, how do I go from 10,000 to 100,000? There are not a lot of answers to that. That answer requires you to go all in 100% on that one or two things. Whereas going 2X, you go all in on all these little things that just keep you busy and busy and busy, right? So when you go into 10X your business or whatever you're pursuing, you have to look at it like you're focusing like an arrow on this one thing. You figure out what that one element is. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions, and you're only going to get one or two answers. So you choose which one that you're going to go all in on, and you have to go all in on it, which means you have to basically say no and ignore 95% of the other things that are coming into your life and the other opportunities that are presenting themselves that can be distractions. That was a big lesson too, because, when I first started working with a lot of very successful people, they said no all the time, and they would continually scale their business. And they would say no to me about things. Hey, can we do something like that? Nah, not really. When I spent time with them and I really analyzed what they were doing, they were saying no because it didn't fit that one thing that they knew they had to go all in on to 10x their business. And that's a huge mindset. Like 10xing your business is not necessarily the result. It's not based on the result. It's based on asking the question, how do we get that result? Changing our mindset and changing our perspective of everything so that we focus on that one thing, ultimately say no to the other distractions that can make their way into our life. That's a very, very, very powerful decision that you have to make.
Yeah, what you're referring to is something we talked about called opportunity cost. Why don't we talk about that a little bit? Explain what is an opportunity cost? How does that relate?
Every time you say yes to something, you have to say no to other things. So if I say, yes, I'm going to go all in on just writing music for licensing opportunities, that means that I have a choice. I either go all in on this and I scale my business, or I can get distracted and go, oh, someone so-and-so just called me and they want me to play guitar in a session for them. So I'm going to stop what I'm doing on this path and I'm going to go pursue this opportunity for the next 3 or 4 days and play on this record. I followed these other little opportunities at what cost? Well, now I gave up on this pursuit that I was on. We see that all the time with people who come into our world. It's all those distractions, right? Like if you're just chasing the dollar, there are a zillion opportunities that will come up that will pay you the dollar, that will pull you away from what you should be focused on. And that kind of goes back to the whole idea of 10x versus 2x. If you're looking at the 2x, how do I 2x my income? If I made $35,000 this year, how do I make $75,000 this year? You do a lot more. You say yes to all the gigs, all the sessions, all the opportunities that come up. So you stay crazy busy and you're going to get a little bit more money. You're going to cap out though. Our time is finite. We're not robots. We need sleep. We need rest. You're going to get too busy to where your performances are going to go down in quality. And then of course the phone stops ringing, right? So that goes back to the whole idea of 10xing. What am I going to focus 100% on and go all in on this and ultimately ignore and say no to the other 95% of opportunities that would pull me away from that and distract me from this goal?
Well, let's talk about that as it relates to sync and creatives, choosing which genre, which lane to focus on, because a lot of creatives get, those shiny objects. Oh, that sounds like fun. I'll try that genre. That sounds like fun. I'll try video games. That sounds like fun. I'll try ads. I'll try trailers. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I had success first with TV. That was the first opportunity that presented itself to me. That was where I learned about licensing. So I went down that TV route. And as I was going down that route, I started learning about some other things. Like I remember when an individual that myself and my partner knew released a trailer record. And within the first 4 months, he had licensed 4 of his tracks from that trailer record, which he did in his bedroom at his parents' house. So he was still living at home and did that out of his bedroom. He made over 6 figures and we were just blown away. And so at that point, that was like, oh, okay, what is this other avenue? So we started looking into it and it's a very small niche. We chose to get into it and we really niched down. And for us to get into that, it meant saying no to a lot of the TV stuff. It meant saying no to the songwriters that we were working with, just doing regular pop songs and stuff like that. So we had to put a lot of time and energy into those records as we started building that company. And then it was the same thing with commercials. Ads kind of have their own thing, just like trailer music has its own thing, ads have its own thing. And so as we started really, having success then in the trailer market, it's like, well, how can we branch out? How can we turn this? We've got this system locked in. We got the TV system locked in. We've now got the film system locked in. How can we now capitalize on the ads niche? And that required learning how to write for ads, listening to a lot of commercials, and then focusing in on the various companies that worked with ad agencies. So it's just like with our trailer company, we are repped by a company we went with specifically because of their outlet and connection to the various trailer houses. That ads catalog is in an entirely different music library under entirely different representation. That company, their primary outlet are ad agencies, based in Chicago and New York. So again, it was a matter of getting into the specific niche and getting very targeted in not only writing for that niche, but then also finding the team and the representation that was extremely targeted to that niche.
How much time would you say you spent on each niche, niching down for ads and niching down for trailers?
When we did our first trailer record, which was called Dark Light, that came out in December of 2011. And I'd say from January until easily, June or July of 2012, I was on LinkedIn almost every night connecting with different music editors who worked at the various trailer houses, supervisors who worked at the various trailer houses. I was spending a lot of time on a number of different trailer websites. You're reading a lot of interviews with the editors and supervisors from those trailer houses. I spent a lot of time building that network with those people. And I treated it like a job. Every night I would definitely put in a solid hour to an hour and a half just focused on how do I build that network. So then at that point, it involved flying out to Los Angeles about 3 times a year for a week at a time, getting a rental car, getting a hotel, scheduling meetings, that type of work that went into it to really build that network even more instead of just hiding behind the computer screen.
Let's get back towards mindset. And we were talking about 10x being easier than 2x. What type of mindset does it take to be able to embrace that and go all in on a 10x mindset?
There's that book, Think and Grow Rich. It's one of the very first personal development books that came out like 100 years ago, right? I remember when I first heard that title, Think and Grow Rich. Again, this kind of goes back to early in my career. I heard the successful people that I was working with who I really admired. That book always came up. And I was always like, that's garbage. Okay, I'm going to think I'm a millionaire. So I'm going to go to the bank tomorrow. I'm going to ask them, I'd like to withdraw $1 million. No, Michael, you can't. You don't have $1 million. Well, what are you talking? I think I'm rich, therefore I'm rich. And I didn't realize the actual concept until I read the book. And then I spent a lot of time with that book, by the way, and then just studying perspective. What's very interesting, and it's also one of the reasons why I think that a lot of people on social media are morons. I think a lot of people who get on social media and they just post negative stuff, I think they're idiots. And the reason why is because when you actually look at the whole concept of Think and Grow Rich, and I've kind of drawn it out in what I call a Thrive cycle, it starts with how you think about things, right? You choose to think about things in a positive or negative way. Your circumstances do not dictate your thoughts. Some people think that, like, oh, I'm a starving musician, and they immediately think that they have to think negatively. Your circumstances are actually determined by how you think about them, which is fascinating, right? You can think, oh, I'm a starving artist, and you can go, it's the worst thing in the world. Well, now you're going to have, negative thoughts. It's going to lead to negative feelings and negative beliefs about the potential that you have in the future. Or you can choose to look at it in a positive light and say, I'm a starving and struggling musician. Every time my phone rings, my life can change. I'm like literally one phone call away from a life-changing moment. That's a completely different thought process. And it starts with that decision that you choose to have. So it starts there with a decision that really determines how you're going to look at your circumstances, moving backwards. But then from there, if you're positive, you're thinking things on the positive side of things, you're going to naturally have positive feelings about that. You're going to have natural positive beliefs about, the future and what's coming your way and whatnot. If you have negative thoughts, you go on what I call a thought spiral. One negative thought leads to a negative thought, leads to a negative thought. You're so far off the target that you're out there somewhere. So that's where it starts. Your thoughts lead to your beliefs and your actions. And then from there, you have another decision to make. Are you going to take action? You don't naturally take action. You have to choose to take action. So if you have negative thoughts and beliefs about something and you choose to take action on them, you're most likely going to take a negative action. That's why I feel like the people who are posting negative stuff on social media, getting into arguments on social media, they've already made 2 conscious bad decisions. They've made a conscious decision to think negatively about whatever's going on. Then they made the conscious decision to take negative action and start an argument. So now you've gone on a thought spiral and you're on an action spiral. You're off target. It's sad to see. When you take positive thoughts, when you consciously choose to have positive thoughts about it, look for the positive. It's going to lead to those positive feelings, those positive beliefs. You choose then to take positive actions based on those beliefs. That's what gives you results. Those results change your circumstances and it becomes that cycle. Now you have new circumstances. What are your thoughts on them? Are they going to be positive or negative? Well, the moment they're negative, you're on a negative thought spiral. You're off target. You're over there. And when you look at very successful people, very rarely do you see them leading with negativity. But I think it's very interesting that, The ones who never made it, the ones who just gave up and walked away, they were ones who always led with negativity. And the reason why they never made it was because no successful person wants to be around that. So if you're leading with negativity and the first thing you're doing is presenting yourself in a negative light with a negative thought, with a negative phrase, with a negative, whatever's coming out of your mouth is negative, you're immediately turning off the professionals who ideally you would want to work with. It's a huge red flag. So that's why I think that a lot of people who lead with negativity online it's dumb. You're sealing your fate because you're going on all these spirals that are keeping you off target. And it all starts with a decision that you make up here in your mind to look at things in a positive light. It's a decision. You have to make that decision. If you don't make that decision, you see people who've been in car accidents and you think, oh my gosh, that's awful. But then you hear them talk and they go, man, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. So that's an example of their thoughts. They choose to look at it in a positive light. And suddenly all these positive things start happening for them because they're staying in that thrive cycle.
What would you say is the most important question that someone can ask themselves? What would that question be?
As someone, and I know you can relate to this too, who pursued a career as the rock star, we oftentimes did that for selfish reasons. And I think it's just the nature of youth and not fully understanding the transaction of value versus money, right? When you look at all the musicians who have crushed it and who are tremendously successful, they are bringing value to the marketplace in some capacity, in some way. I think that the most important question that I wish I knew back when I was 20 or 21 was why. Simon Sinek has a book called Start With Why. It's actually one of the most viewed TED Talks as well. I read that book back in 2017, Start With Why, and it completely changed my life. It makes you actually step back and ask yourself, why am I doing this? I think as musicians, we can get distracted by all of the things that can kind of pull us away from our why and why we're really doing it. And I think a lot of us just didn't know why we were pursuing this. Why were we giving up so much in pursuit of this? I really believe that when you step back and you go levels deep, not just like, why do I like music? But like, okay, why do I like music? Well, I like music because it makes me feel good. Why? Well, it makes me feel good because, I don't really have a lot of friends. And so I spend a lot of time by myself and these musicians, like their songs, they speak to me, I feel recognized. And what we do is if we keep asking ourselves the question why, the first three answers are always very superficial. It's not until we start getting like 6 or 7 layers deep into that why that we actually start getting into the core, the root reason of why this is so important to us. Why are we willing to give up our lives and dedicate our lives to notes and melodies? And for everyone, it's different. I really feel like you have to ask yourself that question 6 or 7 times before you get to the core reason. And then at that point, that becomes that motivation. That's why, why did I give up so much of my life and time and energy? And why do I focus on getting into my studio and doing this every day? When you ask that question that many times, you start realizing, well, it's because for me, it was a lifestyle. I'm fascinated by lifestyle. This is a lifestyle that fascinates me. All the other things, which I was able to do a lot of them, even though when I accomplished them, they weren't as fulfilling. Well, it's because I didn't understand at that time. I thought, well, once I get on a tour bus and I travel, I've accomplished it. Then you accomplish it and you're like, this doesn't really mean much. Well, once I get a song on TV, I'll have accomplished it. And then you're like, I got a song on TV. It doesn't really mean much. If I'm touring, if I'm getting songs on TV, if I get songs on the radio, it doesn't end there. It's a lifestyle. This is something that is going to happen like breathing until I have no control over my fingers or I'm put in a nursing home. Because it's a lifestyle. Now, everyone is different. So I've just realized that for me, it doesn't matter what I accomplish. I'm going to be back in my studio the next day.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle and you want it as bad as you want to breathe.
If you would like to join a thriving community of elite sync professionals dedicated to ensuring each other's success in sync licensing, then Elite Music Coaching invites you to join Sync Titan.
That's right. And inside this community, you're going to have opportunities to connect directly with sync professionals like music supervisors, sync agents, and music library reps in our monthly virtual meetup and networking events. You're going to be able to get coaching directly from Jody and myself. We have listening sessions. And we also have meetups where you can connect with other collaborators all throughout the world.
Also, we post opportunities for you to submit your music to films, TV shows, trailers, commercials, video games, podcasts, web series, and more. As a Sync Titan member, you're also eligible to receive a Sync Titan award.
So make sure to click the link below or above or to the side or wherever it is on this channel so that you can learn more about Sync Titan and how you can become a valued member of this community.